Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. In Baltimore, a judge has declared a mistrial in the case of the first police officer to be charged in the death of Freddie Gray after jurors were unable to reach a verdict on any of the charges against Officer William Porter. Gray died in April from injuries sustained in the back of a police van. Gray's family and attorney say his voice box was crushed and his spine was 80% severed at the neck. A preliminary autopsy report showed the 25-year-old African-American died of a spinal injury. Attorneys are expected to meet this morning to decide if Porter should be tried again. Gray's death in April sparked large protests. On Wednesday, scores of Baltimore residents took to the streets again to protest the hung jury. At least 2 people were arrested. We'll go to Baltimore for more on the case after headlines. Meanwhile, in Chicago, white police officer Jason Van Dyke has been formally indicted on 6 counts of first-degree murder for the fatal shooting of 17-year-old Laquan McDonald more than a year ago. Dash cam video, only recently released by court order, shows the teenager posing no threat and walking away from the officers at a distance as Officer Van Dyke jumps out of his police car and opens fire, striking McDonald 16 times. The case has sparked massive protests across Chicago, the ouster of former Chicago Police Chief Gary McCarthy, and increasing calls for Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel's resignation. On Wednesday, as Mayor Emanuel was visiting the boys' charter school Urban Prep Charter Academy in the Southside neighborhood of Englewood, students began chanting 16 shots, the slogan many protesters have been using in calling for Emanuel's resignation. Mayor Emanuel abruptly left after the assembly. New York has agreed to overhaul the system of solitary confinement in state prisons following a 3-year legal battle by the New York Civil Liberties Union. Currently, New York State holds 4,000 prisoners in solitary confinement in 6-foot by 10-foot cells for 23 hours a day, often for years. The new agreement seeks to dramatically reduce the number of people in solitary confinement and the length of their stay. It imposes a maximum sentence of 3 months in solitary for most disciplinary violations and bars the use of solitary confinement for first-time violations for drug use or possession. New York Civil Liberties Union Executive Director Donna Lieberman wrote, quote, "No prison system of this size has ever taken on such sweeping and comprehensive reforms to solitary confinement at one time. Today marks the end of the era where incarcerated New Yorkers are simply thrown into the box to be forgotten under torturous conditions as a punishment of first resort." Federal prosecutors have announced they will file criminal charges against a friend and former neighbor of Syed Rizwan Farook, one of the suspects in the San Bernardino shooting massacre, which killed 14 people at the Inland Regional Center on December 2nd. Officials have accused Enrique Marquez of buying 2 assault rifles 3 years ago, which authorities say were used in the shooting. Meanwhile, FBI Director James Comey said suspect Tashfeen Malik did not pledge allegiance to ISIS on social media, contrary to previous reports. Many news outlets had previously reported that Malik had posted on Facebook pledging allegiance to ISIS, citing unnamed government officials. Speaking Wednesday, Comey said these reports were false, but said suspects Syed Rizwan Farook and Tashfeen Malik had communicated about their plans in private messages. He did not say the messages were encrypted. Speaking at a news conference in New York City Wednesday, Comey also said there was no evidence that the suspects had any links to any organized terrorist groups.
We still see in San Bernardino no indication of direct contact with foreign terrorist organization, and obviously that would include any direction from foreign terrorist organization. So far in this investigation, we have found no evidence of posting on social media by either of them at that period of time and thereafter reflecting their commitment to jihad or to martyrdom. I've seen some reporting on that, and that's a garble, right? The investigation continues, but we have not found that kind of thing.
Congress is voting on a $1.1 trillion budget deal today, which includes a provision to end the decades-old ban on exporting U.S.-produced crude oil. Lifting the crude oil export ban has long been a demand of the oil industry. Companies including BP, ExxonMobil, Chevron, Hess, ConocoPhillips, Chesapeake Energy, and Marathon Oil have all lobbied for bills to lift the ban within the last few years. Environmental group Oil Change International says lifting the ban will incentivize further domestic oil production and is, quote, a disaster for the climate. Meanwhile, the Federal Reserve says it's lifting interest rates for the first time since the 2007-08 financial crisis. Federal Reserve President Janet Yellen said the interest rate hike reflects the economic recovery has, quote, clearly come a long way, unquote. In response, Democratic presidential candidate Bernie Sanders wrote, quote, at a time when real unemployment is nearly 10% and youth unemployment is off the charts, we need to do everything possible to create millions of good-paying jobs and raise the wages of the American people. The Fed should act with the same sense of urgency to rebuild the disappearing middle class as it did to bail out Wall Street banks 7 years ago, Bernie Sanders, the presidential candidate, said. In Turkey, at least 7 people have been killed by Turkish security forces as authorities have declared a curfew across the mainly Kurdish southeast region. At least 2 of those killed were protesters who were demonstrating against a police crackdown. The deaths come amidst an escalating Turkish police and military crackdown across Kurdish communities in Turkey's southeast. A resident of the southeast town of Cizre, who did not give their name for safety reasons, spoke out against the repression.
I find these policies erroneous. The pressure on Kurdish people has become unacceptable. What is it that we cannot share? Enough is enough. We want peace.
And in Nevada, a media mystery may have been revealed. Fortune magazine first reported that major Republican Party donor Sheldon Adelson has bought Nevada's largest daily newspaper, the Las Vegas Review-Journal, for $140 million. Last week's purchase was reportedly arranged by Adelson's son-in-law. The revelation follows a week of questions and uncertainty as the Adelson family attempted to keep the purchase secret, even from the newspaper's own staff. Las Vegas Review-Journal reporter Sean Whaley tweeted last week, quote, I have some stories to write Monday, but I don't know who I'm working for. I am not happy. Republican presidential candidates have returned to the campaign trail following Tuesday's Republican presidential debate in Las Vegas. In Arizona, Maricopa County Sheriff Joe Arpaio, whose office the U.S. Justice Department has said holds a, quote, systematic disregard for basic constitutional protections, introduced candidate Donald Trump at a rally by reminding the audience that the two of them are both prominent birthers who question the validity of President Obama's U.S. birth certificate.
We have something in common, the birth certificate investigation, which is still going on, illegal immigration, and one more thing we share, birthday.
Donald Trump has been one of the leaders of the birther movement. In 2011, he claimed to have sent investigators to Hawaii. In Illinois, the private Christian school Wheaton College has suspended a tenured professor who's begun wearing a headscarf in solidarity with her Muslim neighbors. Political science professor Larecia Hawkins posted on Facebook, quote, I stand in religious solidarity with Muslims because they, like me, a Christian, are people of the book. And as Pope Francis stated last week, we worship the same God, she wrote. In response, Wheaton College suspended Hawkins, saying her words violated an oath required by the school. Speaking at a news conference at a Chicago church Wednesday, Hawkins said wearing the headscarf is embodied solidarity.
The point of this is being embodied solidarity. Theoretical solidarity is not solidarity. So being with people requires sacrificing our bodies, and that's what I'm doing, and I won't turn back on that. I won't look back. And I'll continue to do this until Christmas.
And 5 years ago today, a Tunisian street vendor named Mohamed Bouazizi set himself on fire. On December 17, 2010, the 26-year-old protested authorities' harassment as he tried to sell fruit and vegetables at the market. The act led to protests across Tunisia. It eventually brought about the ouster of President Zine al-Abidine Ben Ali, followed by the Egyptian Revolution and the Arab Spring. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Hi, I'm Amy Goodman. I want to thank you for tuning in to Democracy Now! We are so grateful to our fans and followers for being a part of the daily conversation. By choosing a news source that's committed to the truth, you're carrying the message of independent media, reaching hundreds of thousands of people every day. In these times of war and elections, we need a media not sponsored by corporations that profit from war, but a media that's truly independent, funded by you. Democracy Now! Is not paid for by the weapons manufacturers, the insurance industry, or the oil, gas, coal, or nuclear companies. We don't take advertising or corporate underwriting dollars. That means we rely on your donations to make our daily independent news hour possible. We need your support today to keep bringing you the hard-hitting, in-depth reporting you've come to expect 5 days a week. Visit democracynow.org, or you can call 888-999-3877. That's 888-999-3877 to make your holiday gift to Democracy Now! Today. Thanks so much for sharing Democracy Now! Stories all year long.